Hello, I'm Adam, and momentarily I'll be joined by Lindsay. Hey, Lindsay.
Hi.
So this is the last weekly video for You Are Not Your Own, Belonging to God in an Inhuman World by Mr. Alan Noble. We're covering chapters 6 and 7. Sorry for the delay. Originally, we were hoping to get this out 2 weeks ago. But I was at camp in Kentucky with the youth from our church.
Yep.
And then the next week it was July 4th. And so here we are. We're a couple of weeks delayed, but I know several of you have been asking about this video, wondering when it would be coming out and whatnot. Thank you for tracking along with us. Yeah, we're going to cover chapters 6 and 7 tonight. This is the short video. It is not Thursday. It's Sunday. This is going to be released as soon as possible. Sorry, Theology Thursday works normally, but
you can watch it on Thursday.
Yeah, you can watch it whenever you want. So we were going to do a live session tonight. We were going to try to get a wrap-up video or 6 and 7 video out before now and then do a live session tonight. That just didn't work out. We're not going to end up doing a live session for the for this book, for this first time back on Theology Thursdays, but digital. We're going to be, our family's going to be in Pennsylvania the next couple of weeks, so it's just going to be kind of crazy trying to do that, and we don't want to hold off on the next book, which we're going to start, which is this little guy right here, God in Public, How the Bible Speaks Truth to Power Today by Mr. Tom Wright. I've never read a book by Tom Wright. I've read books by N.T. Wright, which
Isn't it the same guy?
It is the same guy.
Okay, I was like, wait, I thought that it was the same guy.
If I'm not mistaken, Tom Wright is what he goes by when it's more scholarly work. I've read his popular level stuff. I always thought it was, but it's apparently not.
Oh.
I gathered that from Justin Brierley.
I did not mean to pick the scholarly.
Well, no, I think it'll be very accessible. I have not read it. Lindsay has not read it.
Nope.
Right?
I found it on our bookshelf.
Yeah, it's a book that we've got that we've been interested in. We were just talking about. Hey, we've got politics are happening. Mm-hmm. They're always happening. But we got elections coming up, and
since he's not an American.
Yeah, he's not an American. Okay. Yeah. So that's gonna be fun. We're gonna do that in August, right?
Yeah.
It's 10 chapters, if I'm not mistaken, and we've got actually 5 Thursdays in August. So pray for us. We're gonna try to do a video a week, or a short video, a long video each week, and we're gonna plow through this guy in those 5 weeks. Yeah. Those 5 Thursdays of August. So. Get it. We'll include links in the show notes or the comment section on Facebook, that sort of thing. And we'll go from there.
All right. So moving into chapter 6.
Yes.
So we're going to start with You Are Not Your Own tonight. So I actually had the last 2 chapters, the chapters where he lost me more, that I disagreed with him more. So I'm just going to throw that up front. Those are...
Yeah.
I feel like it kind of like derailed a little bit there. But anyway, so on page 161, if you want to look at it says, when you come to see how contemporary anthropology shapes our desires, forms our society, and drives us to depression and despair, you're better able to resist its influence. And so one thing I was thinking about it was sometimes naming the problem does solve the problem a little bit.
Knowing what you're dealing with? Okay.
However, in this instance, I kind of feel like it's the opposite. Okay. That naming the problem, saying the scope, made it feel like an impossible task.
Oh, yeah.
It kind of made it feel like, it's too big. Better not try.
Okay.
Because
it's overwhelming, daunting.
Yeah. And that's partially my personality, is when I can't do something extremely well or perfectly or how I want to do it ideally, I just don't do it.
Yeah.
Skip that.
In seminary, we read it was a portion of a book or something like that we read early on in seminary that said, you've always heard the adage, if something is worth doing, it's worth doing well. And he said, I want you to scrap that. If something is worth doing, it's worth doing poorly. Because there are times in life where you just have to do the thing, even though you don't have the capacity to do it well. Sometimes it's just in the, what T.S. Eliot, it's in the trying.
Yeah.
It's all that's left to us is the trying. Everything else is up to God. And
I do kind of get that, and I intellectually know that. I just know also how I am. And when you present something as something that I can't do, I'm just not going to do it.
Yeah. It's hard to start a game that you know you are going to lose.
Yeah. And I feel like that it's set up that way, but I feel like he's set it up that way, but in the end, we know that this is a game that we win.
Well, so that's where
I think I bumped the table. That's probably going to give some motion sickness. If
sorry.
You
So I do think my theological differences with him kind of shine more glaringly in chapters 6 and 7, and one of those things is because I think there is, and he's adamant that he's not trying to give you quick fixes. He's not going to give you a 1, 2, 3. If you do these 3 things, things are going to get better.
I feel like he gave you no fixes.
But it's almost like I feel
like we're cart before the horse here, though.
We might be.
He also mentions that comfort is not peace, and that kind of was a little bit of a puzzling thing to me. So, how would you describe comfort? Like, how would you define it? Oh, by the way, Adam gets put on. He likes getting put on the spot. He doesn't like knowing, so
I don't like knowing.
I outline all the things, and then I just put him on the spot.
Yeah. So, so I would say comfort is to peace, like maybe like happiness is to joy. Although those are all those are loaded terms. But I think comfort is something that's fleeting. It's something that you have to like work toward. And peace is, I'm assuming by peace he's talking about like shalom, in the sense of like God's restorative order, where he's putting all things at rest and where things are functioning as they ought. I think he's saying that, if I'm not mistaken, he's suggesting that it's possible to comfort yourself even in a completely like broken world and whatnot, and just finding comfort is not the same as finding the peace of God that he promises us, which does surpass all understanding, but also it puts back to order things that are broken and whatnot, and brings like wholeness and fullness in life. Comfort is not the same as that. You can eat a big meal and be really happy and satisfied, and life can still be a mess. And you know,
I hear you.
Yeah,
I got you. We'll expound on that in the long video a little bit.
Okay.
He also on page 163, he points out that we all have to begin with grace for our neighbors and ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is something that I've learned. In some instances, I'm very quick to give myself grace because I understand what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And so like I know all the situation. I'm like, it's fine.
Yeah.
You know? And then not quick to do the same for others. But in more often than not, I'm more harsh on myself than I am on others.
You are.
And so I know that some people are not that way. I know some people are more harsh on others than they are themselves.
And I am.
But I'm the opposite. I'm way more harsh on myself than others.
And folks would probably be shocked or maybe surprised. Maybe they wouldn't be. Maybe they would act surprised. But to know that I'm the opposite of that, I tend to like give myself a pass an awful lot. And I tend to be like very frustrated with other people and whatnot. Yeah. And when you point out how I'm needing to have grace toward others, whether it's because I'm mad at other drivers or mad at the house not getting cleaned up quickly enough or whatever, then that does frustrate me. But it's because I tend to show myself a lot of grace and not others.
You also think that you move a lot faster than you think.
I do.
I'm
convinced myself that I'm like quick.
That you're very efficient. So, is grace, like showing others grace, showing ourselves grace, is that, like, Imogen and I were talking about bumper stickers the other day, and like we were talking about making a bumper sticker that says like, calm down, we're all doing our best here.
Yes.
So, is that what we're talking about grace for ourselves and others? Is it like, just calm down, we're all doing our best. We're trying,
Yeah, I think,
is it more of like a showing of God's grace and mercy, like, hey, there's a better way here, and holding a higher standard, both for ourselves and others, and saying like, hey, you don't have to settle.
Yeah,
like there is more. Like which.
So I think the inclination, and maybe even what he's suggesting, is the former. They're like, hey, give people a pass, chill, be generous in your interactions with others, have grace.
And I do think there are a lot of things that are heart issues, and so you cannot possibly know for another person. You can know for yourself, you just can't know for someone else.
Well, unless you like fool yourself. I mean, there are times.
I'm convinced no one really fools themselves.
Maybe.
Yeah. I feel like
But I do think that we should have that higher form of grace where we're talking about not just a pass or mercy, but no, we are working for and trying to be conduits of God's grace in the lives of others, means of his grace to the extent that we're able, and pointing others to his grace, which is not just a pass or a feeling that he has for us, but as Wesleyans we would say his grace is his life and power extended to us. When he gives us his grace, he doesn't just give us a feeling, he gives us himself. He makes the move toward us.
So then he goes on to talk about, we're convinced that we have the plan for redeeming the world, that we're the agents of redemption, whether it's spiritual, political, or physical, that we won't have grace for those who aren't part of our movement and who aren't doing enough. And I feel like that's a very easy trap to fall into when everybody has their own platform.
Yeah.
Because everybody's got like their way of doing things, and everyone's like an instant expert, right?
Oh, yeah.
You have like, there's the rise of like beginning experts where someone literally just started doing this thing, and because they got into it and they're researching it, they're not the expert on the thing, even though they've been doing it for like 5 minutes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And we do that in a lot of things.
I don't do that. And it's hilarious because like it will be something that I have like done my whole life, and I'll be like, well, man, I'm not an expert at it.
Yeah.
Like,
but we do that with all sorts of stuff. You read an article about, statistical trends in baseball, and suddenly like you're like flexing your new knowledge and whatnot.
You're like a 12-year-old boy.
You read an article. You read an article. Yes.
But I feel like that turning our movement, our way of doing things, that it's easy and it's very common that we turn these non-central and even non-biblical issues into the central issues.
Do you have examples of that?
I mean,
or should we save that, or
we can go talk a little bit about it? I guess we have a little bit of time. But things like if you're super into like homemaking and you're like the floral dress wearing, linen apron wearing, like I'm making everything from scratch, that somehow becomes part of the gospel for you.
Okay. Yeah.
Because it's become so central to who you are.
Yeah. This
is like how we as women should live out the gospel.
Sure. Okay.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah. But it's clearly a non-central issue.
You kind of elevate, you elevate that thing that you are enjoying, appreciating, as though this is what it means to live the good life.
Right.
And by the good life, we mean the Christ-ordered life.
Right.
The Spirit-filled life, that sort of thing. Gotcha. Okay.
And I feel like it's very common to do that and very easy to do that because everybody has a platform. Everybody's got a microphone. Yeah. Everybody's an influencer.
Yeah.
Even of one.
Yes.
The influencer of one.
Influencer of one.
He talks also about that simple, honest pleasures ease the strain of living. So how can we embrace simple, honest pleasures? And I mean, you've read a lot of books in the last few years about such things.
Yeah. Well, so one is, does he talk about, he talks a good bit about Ecclesiastes
like
here, doesn't he? Does he talk about Ecclesiastes at length?
A little bit there.
Okay. Yeah, so we recently read Ecclesiastes because we're reading the Bible in a year and we're moving through it chronologically.
I feel like Ecclesiastes, I always joke that Proverbs is your grandma, like giving you advice with the pie at the dinner table.
Yeah.
And not my grandma, because my grandma would not have given me a piece of pie at the dinner table. Yeah. She was not that type of grandma. But, it's like the sweet old grandma, and Ecclesiastes is the old man yelling from his front porch.
Yes. Yeah. So, but one of the points that Ecclesiastes does make is that life is filled with all sorts of trouble. It's filled with all sorts of difficulties. I was texting with a friend just earlier this afternoon, just shared something kind of making a joke about that. But there are things that God has given us that, you could call them creature comforts, but that's kind of minimizing them. But things like family and work and, so the people with whom you live your life, the things that you do with your hands or your mind, the things that you've got to spend your days doing, interacting with family and laboring over something, those are things that God has given you.
That is heaven. A picture of new earth is.
Yeah.
I planted a vineyard and I got to eat the fruit of my labor.
And that's what
I
shalom.
built a house and got to live in my house.
And that's what shalom is all about. It is things are rightly ordered.
Yeah.
And so he's given us those things, and family, friendship, and work. Those are actually expressions of his image, and so those are like huge. But then there are even other smaller ones that I would be more inclined to refer to as creature comforts. Things like a good meal. Things like enjoying a really good cup of coffee. Things like
you would enjoy a really bad cup of coffee too, though.
Under some circumstances.
It never fails. We go somewhere that's like not typically known for coffee, and you're like, they actually have really good coffee here. You've never said this coffee is terrible.
No, but
the only place you say this coffee is terrible is Starbucks.
I do. I'm definitely
we can walk into a waffle
snob.
House, and you're like, they got really good coffee here.
So
Racetrack, they've got really good coffee
here. To be
here.
clear, if I'm making the Starbucks coffee, then it's like, okay, I enjoy it, especially a blonde. But yeah, I'm not a fan of like overly brewed and overly.
Embrace the simple, honest pleasures,
things.
like just paying attention to them, being grateful for them,
receiving them gratefully, which is what Paul or Peter in the New Testament they talk about. Like nothing is unclean if it's received with thanksgiving and whatnot.
But saying, hey, this is a gift.
Yeah.
Like, good weather. If we can get the weather, under 90 degrees around here.
Yeah.
We can receive that gratefully. I have a hard time receiving 90 with 75% humidity gratefully, but So he then goes on to talk about, you will not save the world, you can't even save yourself. And that was page 169. I feel like that's kind of where we start to like differ.
Yeah.
Because
we don't think you can save yourself.
No, we don't think you can save yourself.
Yes.
But I would not have emphasized, you will not save the world, you cannot save yourself. Because I would have said, you can be saved, and so can the world.
Sure. Well, that is a different emphasis. Yeah. No doubt.
That it's not about me doing something, but these things can happen.
Yeah.
And so it kind of reminded me a little bit of just the different wording or whatever. Reminded me of, I think it's Kinlaw talks about the second witness.
The law of the second witness.
Yes. Is that Kinlaw or is that
It's Kinlaw. It's in Preaching in the Spirit.
Okay.
Which is strange that that's where that comes from, but it's a central
a
central point to his theology.
Gregory Kokel also points that out a lot in his discussions and some of his books about like talking to people who are not saved or not yet saved. Is basically you're like God is working in their lives, and you're not the first person working in their lives because the Spirit's always there before you.
Yeah.
And you don't have to be the person that like brings all this to completion.
Yeah.
You
don't have to be the closer either.
You're just
the middleman pitcher. Like just get us a couple of innings.
But I feel like the shift in focus changes it from like you will not save the world, you can't even save yourself. Seems like there's nothing you can do, so why bother? At least to someone like me, it does. To someone like me, it feels like you are not going to do anything, so just do what you want to do. There's work to be done, and it is not your work to be done, but it is your work to participate in.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And it's a far more like optimistic understanding of
and I'm
grace.
not an optimist at all.
You're not, but it is. You do have a Wesleyan optimistic understanding of grace, and even the way you were talking about God at work in their lives and the lives of people who are not yet there, who are not yet born again, who are not yet awakened even. What you're describing is prevenient grace, which is distinctively like Arminian it's not exclusive to Arminianism, but it's definitely not the same as common grace in a Calvinist theological structure. But sure. Yeah. God is at work in their lives, drawing
and God
them
is at
to
work
himself.
In the world.
Yes.
And you can be saved, and the world will be saved.
And you can join him in his work and participate.
Right.
Yes.
And the world will be saved. Everything will be put to right.
Yes.
It doesn't matter how broken it seems to us, it will be put right.
Yes.
Period.
Yes.
So, sorry.
Though we're not universalists.
No.
We should be clear about that.
No. Yeah. He's putting it to right the way he wants it.
Yeah, even if you don't want to be a part of it.
He being God. I feel like I shouldn't specify. So,
Not noble.
No, yeah, not noble. So, if it is really the right thing to do, the efficiency does not matter. So that's a big thing, and we'll talk about this probably extensively more in our long form.
Okay.
But what does that mean in your personal life? That the right thing to do is the right thing to do, even if it's not the efficient thing.
I mean, so I've been reading a book on ethics and been wrestling with this sort of topic, and that is a big question: is are there times in which doing the right thing, and I think the answer is obviously yes. Are there times in which doing the right thing still don't have the results that you want them to have, or are we relativists or utilitarians and say, hey, whatever gets the job done, we're willing to do. We're willing to compromise ourselves ethically for the sake of efficiency and success and that sort of thing.
And I think that'll probably lead us into the next book at some point as well.
I'm sure he's going to have a lot to say about that.
You're talking about politics, you're talking about
efficiency. You're talking about compromise, you're talking about efficiency, you're talking about utilitarianism and what gets the job done, and everything's all pragmatics and whatnot. Yeah. I forget what you asked, but...
Yeah. What does it mean in our personal lives that sometimes the right thing to do is not the efficient thing to do? The efficiency doesn't matter if it's the right thing to do.
Well, you just think about how you start your day. What's his name? Peter Kraft. He talks about, there are 3 ways to start your day as a Christian. You wake up and you're like, man, I got so much to do today. I just don't have time to read my Bible, spend time in prayer and whatnot. And so you go about your day, you accomplish some stuff, and in the end, you didn't get it all done. Or, man, Lord, I've got so much to get done today. I just don't have time. So I'm going to do a little bit. And you maybe read a verse or 2, you throw up a prayer, and then you go about your day, and you maybe even accomplish a little bit more, oddly. Or you do what I think it was Luther did. I've got so much to do, so little time, I must spend at least 3 hours in prayer. It's like, okay, I'm going to give myself I'm going to attend to this thing that is profoundly important in my life and profoundly formative of my life, and is going to calibrate the whole day, calibrate the family, calibrate ministry, life, responsibilities, and all that. And it may not seem like the efficient thing to do because it's just taking up time,
Light down.
Yeah, light down. It's just taking up time. And so is it the efficient thing? Well, no. But it very well may be the right thing. And it very well, and one of the things that Crave points out is that sometimes even in doing that, wasting the time, investing the time rather in doing that, you find you accomplish even more. And that could be because your perspective has changed. It could be because there are things that you thought you should do that you just don't end up doing because they're not priorities anymore. Who knows?
Yeah. And it's the difference in focusing on what's important and focusing on what's emergent.
Yeah.
Sometimes the emergent things are not the important things.
Yeah.
They're just the things that are like jumping up and down in front of you.
The things that are trying to grasp at your attention.
So, and we'll talk more about what does that mean for the church in the long video.
Okay.
So I'm going to skip down to his career advice.
Okay.
Because I feel like that's one of the things, it got me hot. I was a little bit, one of the things that I was a little bit disagreeable with Noble on, especially, so we currently have 2 kids that are at the end of their high school years.
Yeah. One nearing it quickly.
Yeah, one that's graduating and one will be graduating next year. Mm-hmm. Or so one that's graduated this year and one that'll graduate. Anyway, so they're both on this finding their career path or whatever. And I would never give them the advice he gives.
Yeah.
Never. Like, it is bad advice. And it's funny because Noble did not take his own advice.
No, he didn't. And when you were telling me your concern with it, I pointed that out. Well, he didn't take his own advice. No. He moved away. He went to school elsewhere. He then moved away from there and went to teach elsewhere, or heck, went and did more schooling elsewhere and whatnot. Yeah, no, he's...
And some of that might come from, we don't live in a community that's a community because we live in such an urban... Suburban... Well, we're suburban, but it's such a, like, just sprawling metro area that none of it feels very communal.
A lot of it is very uprooted. But Yeah, I mean, we have intentionally developed a pretty radical sense of community within our church.
Yes,
but that's
even
not.
that,
But that's not like,
if
hey,
I'm driving.
Yeah.
Like the other day, driving like the kids around or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Our community that we've built is still like an hour and a half from each other.
Yeah, totally.
Like it's a giant spread.
Yeah.
And so it's not really community.
Well,
That's really our church.
Yeah,
and he differentiates between your church and your community.
Yes.
And so I feel like our community at large, we live in an area that doesn't really have much of that.
Yeah.
And but one thing that I feel like, the big thing that I feel like Noble skipped out on was calling.
Yeah.
Like, because he's like, oh, what if your community doesn't need another pastor? And number one, bullcrap. Every community needs another pastor.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, everybody does. Period.
There's not an overly saturated community.
What if you're not needed in missions?
In America. Not even Wilmore, Kentucky.
Yeah, what if you're not needed in missions? Bullcrap. You're needed.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah,
it just is.
Yeah.
Like, if God is calling you to do something, you have to do the thing God's calling you to do. And so if it is in your heart that you're going to be a pastor, that is what you're going to do, and you're not going to be happy unless you do it.
Yeah. We've known an awful lot of people who have experienced that and have lived that out, where they
and it's not the same. Like, not following God's calling for your life is not the same as like giving up on your dream.
No.
Because these are totally different things.
Because calling, in a sense, does like it is not your identity, but it is profoundly tied to your identity.
And it's very personal.
Just like a dream that you have is not, unless you've become obsessed with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we'll go into that more, but he just completely like, there is no calling. God doesn't call us. God doesn't. And I wonder if he's a cessationist. I don't know.
So I suspect he is
Maybe
probably leery of overly charismatic expressions of like immediate access to the mind of God, where God called me to do this, and I don't care what anybody else thinks about it. I'm going to do it because I'm the pioneer.
So, but I also think that if God calls you to do something, God's told somebody else that that's what he's called you to do.
So
you're going to have it verified by others. And we'll get into that more in the long video, because I know you have, like, you normally teach classes on God's calling.
Yeah. And yes, to be clear, if you're not going to watch the long video and you're only watching the short video, we are not radical individualists in the sense of calling either. We do highly emphasize the importance of community, the importance of mentorship.
God's calling you to do something crazy, and everybody around you is like, God is not calling you to do that. God's probably not calling you to do that. You probably got your wires nicked somewhere.
And you might be a cult leader. Who knows?
You might be.
Yeah.
But God's calling people, and even if God's calling you to do something like not pastoral ministry, not youth ministry or missions, God's calling you to do something, I think he mentioned like HVAC repair or something. Maybe I don't know. Maybe he didn't mention that. I don't remember what his example was.
I think he did mention it. Maybe your community needs an HVAC repairman or something.
And, the community does need that, and God might be calling you that, and you might have the giftedness to do that. But if you don't have the giftedness for such things, it'd be ridiculous to say, well, my community needs an HVAC repairman, and even though I'm a really gifted musician and have zero skills in that and zero interest in that, I should do that because that's what my community needs. Yeah. Like, you're not going to be very successful at it because you're not, like, wired towards it, and you're not going to be very happy at it or fulfilled at it, and you're not really going to impact in a kingdom way because of those things. Yeah. Because that's going to affect how you live your life.
Well, yeah.
Okay, so chapter 7. We'll skip to chapter 7 now. So he talks about chapter 7 is called Our Only Comfort. And he begins by talking about belonging to someone else is vulnerable.
It is.
And I think that's a good point. Yeah. That belonging to someone else is vulnerable. Like, you find that in marriage. Mm-hmm. Like, it's very vulnerable, which is one of the big things that I feel like is wrong with divorce in general, is it kind of takes some of the, like, it makes it more vulnerable. Like, yeah. If your spouse is going to leave you because you have postpartum depression, like how big of a weight is that to carry? Yeah.
That's actually, I didn't think you were going there with it, but that's like, that is, it's not counterintuitive, but that was definitely not where I thought you were going with it.
Oh.
And that is like very obvious when you think about it.
Yeah, it's gonna make it worse for you.
That's the obvious thing when you think about it, is especially if you're talking about like in a culture of no fault divorce, like anybody at any point can just be dropped.
Yeah.
And left.
And typically,
what recourse
women
do you have?
women with like chronic illnesses, terminal those sorts of things are left more often than men.
I don't doubt it.
Women tend to become caregivers to their husbands far more often than men become caregivers for their wives.
I don't doubt it, and I think historically the trends are, obviously prior to the modern era, it was obvious that, in a marital situation, men were the kind of the wielders of power, at least for the most part when it comes, It's not that the women didn't have power. They often did have quite a bit of power.
Women often have the most power because we're raising the children. You
got very subversive power.
Yes,
but obviously, in the Old Testament, one of the adages that's often taught to people is, to find joy in the wife of your youth, and oftentimes the prophets, I think Malachi in particular, like chastise those who divorce their wives and whatnot. Jesus obviously chastises people for divorce and says that this is, this is not God's ideal. Was only an allowance because of how evil your hearts were, and so Moses made this allowance for you. So it was always assumed that it was the guy that left the gal because she's aging.
And I'm not saying in our current situation. I mean, I think the statistics are that more women file for divorce than men.
Yeah, I think so.
But there's also they're the ones that handle everything.
Yeah.
And so,
but also more often than not, it is the he who will throw her to the trash heap when it's no longer convenient and comfortable for him to be married to her.
Yeah.
More often than not.
Yeah. And so he talks about being vulnerable to God, and is different because he's the only one that's not going to let you down like that.
Yeah.
That's an entirely different type of vulnerability, but we still don't like being vulnerable.
Sure. Like,
we want to protect ourselves. We want to do everything we can to protect ourselves, and so we often kind of
guard and shield.
Limit how much we feel like we belong because we don't want to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
Which then he points out that the faithful, I think it's on page 200, the faithful Christian life looks like 1,000 little deaths to self every day.
That's actually, that's really good.
And I feel like, really it's true.
Yeah.
But I feel like that's true of any life devoted to anything. Not necessarily to self, but like every yes you say is a no to like 100 other things.
Dr. Uri in seminary used to say that, and I don't know where he got it from, it could have been unique to him, but he used to say that love always requires a death. Yeah. Like anytime you love someone, whether it's a spouse or whether it's a child or whether it's a parent or whether it's a friend, whatever, anytime you love, you're dying to yourself. You're dying to other possibilities. You're dying to for the sake of the family, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to treat myself in this one way. Instead, I'm going to do the responsible thing that's better for the family, or what like oftentimes in the case of a marriage, you've got a spouse, typically the wife, who says, "Hey, I'm not going to do these other things that could bring me a sense of value and meaning in life and make me feel like I can conquer the world. Instead, I'm going to die to those desires and
yeah." But I feel
invest myself else.
But I feel like only in the Christian context do you find your belonging in Christ. You die the thousands of little deaths to self, but then you find that you have more of yourself. Yeah. More of the self that you're made to be.
Yeah. Anyway. Unless a grain of wheat falls to the ground and dies. The gospel is all about resurrection.
Yeah. And so if you're looking at the fig tree, like that he was talking about, you have the fig tree and all the beautiful figs. It's only in the Christian context do you pick a fig and get to have the tree.
Yeah, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. That's pretty good.
So he goes on to say Christianity requires...
Good pick. Here's the tree. Wait,
yeah.
what?
Christianity requires you to deny yourself, deny your body, and to deny the desires that may mean the world to you. And I think that we often struggle with that because we feel like we're entitled to certain things. And we're entitled to the good life. Yeah,
we're entitled to be happy and comfortable and to have our way. And I mean, everything in life screams that at us. Every single advertisement is.
But we all know sometimes you deserve don't get what you want. Yeah. Like sometimes things don't go the way you want it to. Sometimes things don't turn out the way you want it to.
Yeah.
Like sometimes you don't get your way.
Sometimes you don't get what you put in.
Yeah. I chose to end it on his quote on 201.
Okay.
Where he says, no matter our circumstances, our life is good because we live it before God, who intentionally created us and sustains us. And I don't necessarily think that was a great place to end the book, but that's kind of, he adds a little more beyond that. But I feel like he kind of didn't answer or give any, what now?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
There were no action items. And I'm an
there
action-oriented person. And I know he intended to not have any action items, but as an action-oriented person, I was like, and there's nothing I can do.
His action is his follow-up book to this on getting out of bed. His action is get out of bed. Don't quit. You can't quit. You should never quit. Dare not ever quit.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll talk more about all this stuff on the long
video. If you're interested in,
it's tiny. It's like
it is really tight. It's a day
I wish we had
reader.
it down here, but it's
it's such a it's a
good day reader for you, which means it's like an hour.
It is
right? An hour and a half.
Yeah.
For like.
Wait a minute. Yeah. I mean,
if you read it in a day.
Yeah.
Then normal people could probably finish it before getting out of bed.
Yes, maybe. Yes, maybe. No, honestly, that book, if you've ever struggled with OCD, if you've ever struggled with depression, if you've ever struggled with like debilitating anxiety or anything like that, it is a really, really good book. I highly recommend it on getting out of bed. We'll include a link to that.
Yeah.
If you remember. Thanks, guys. Don't forget, Tom Ray, God in Public in August. That's what we're going to be reading.